Wild Bible story you may not remember or may have never heard of. There was a young prophet who was sent on a mission to the land of Judah to confront King Jeroboam. King Jeroboam had turned God's people to idols. And before the young prophet left, God gave him a set of very strict instructions. And he tells him, don't eat food from the place, don't drink water from the place, and don't return the same way that you came. The land was so corrupt and toxic that God did not want the prophet to stain himself with even the food and the water from the place. And so the prophet goes and he finds King Jeroboam standing at a pagan altar. The young prophet shouts his message, and the king, furious, points a finger at him, screaming, "Seize him!" And in that exact moment, the king's arm freezes and it withers like a dead branch. The king can't pull it back. And the altar behind the king also splits in two, and ashes spill everywhere. And the king begins to panic. But then he asks the prophet to pray for him. And the prophet does just that. And so the king's arm is healed. After his healing, the king offers a massive reward and a feast to the young prophet. But the young prophet stands firm. He tells the king, even if you gave me half your palace, I wouldn't stay. God gave me orders, no food, no water, and go by a different way. So far, the young prophet is doing everything right. But on his way home, he stopped to rest under an oak tree. And an old prophet who lived in the land heard about the miracle and tracks this young prophet down. And he invites the young prophet to his house for dinner. The young prophet again says, no, God says I should not eat from this land. I should not drink water from this land, and I should not return by the same way. And then the old prophet does something unthinkable. He looks at the young man and says, I'm a prophet just like you. And an angel spoke to me saying, I should bring you home to eat and drink. Of course he was lying. But the young prophet, perhaps tired and hungry, believed this man of God. So he went back home with him and he ate and he drank. While they were sitting at the table, the old prophet's table, the Spirit of God came upon the liar or the old prophet, and he began to prophesy a judgment over the young prophet. He tells the young prophet that because he had disobeyed God's command, he was not going to make it back home, and he was not going to be buried with his fathers. So after eating, the young prophet travels back home. And unfortunately, he's killed by a lion. The lion does not desecrate his body and does not kill the donkey. So here's a scene of a lion next to a dead body and a donkey very much alive. A pretty odd scene. News travels back to the land of what had happened, and guess who ends up coming to bury the young prophet, the old prophet. But before he went for the young prophet's body to bury him, he tells the people of the land, this is the man of God who disobeyed the Lord, as if he had nothing to do with it. In his letter to the Galatians, the Apostle Paul writes something that perfectly mirrors this tragedy. And he says, but even if we or an angel from heaven preaches any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. The young prophet's mistake was thinking that a new word from an angel could cancel out a clear word from God. If God has given you a conviction, a boundary, or a command in scripture, don't let anyone, no matter how holy they look or how many angels they claim to speak for, talk you out of it. Truth does not have an expiration date. Also, don't be a people pleaser. The young prophet likely didn't want to be rude. I know it's hard to say no to someone that we respect, and we often compromise what God has told us because we want to fit in or avoid looking too radical or unreasonable. So sometimes we would rather offend God than offend people. But remember, the young prophet desired to be polite to a man led to his destruction. Never trade your divine calling and purpose for human approval. Do you remember where the young prophet was when the old prophet found him? He was sitting under an oak tree. He was very tired and he was hungry. He was vulnerable. Most of our compromises don't happen when we're standing strong in front of kings. They happen when we're tired and resting. Be most on your guard when you're physically or emotionally drained. That is when the old prophet will show up with a shortcut that sounds like a blessing, but is actually a snare. The young prophet assumed that because the other man had the title of prophet, he must be telling the truth. We live in a culture that loves to say God is doing a new thing to justify walking away from biblical truths. While God does work in new ways, yeah, he does. He never contradicts his own character or his established word. If God said no in the beginning, it's still no in the middle. The tragedy of 1 Kings 13 is that the young prophet survived the king's wrath, but he couldn't survive the prophet's kindness. Don't let a friendly face lead you away from a faithful God. Stick to his word.